Hey everyone, I'm Lance, the foundation lead at Stargate. Stargate is a bridge within DeFi. The first application built on top of LayerZero still is the largest by number of messages. I have the pleasure of being joined by Mike today from EtherFi. Do you want to give an introduction?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for coming to check out the panel. So I'm Mike. I'm founder and CEO of EtherFi. Actually, show of hands, how many people know what EtherFi is? Oh, that's not bad. Okay, so about half. What EtherFi started off as is a liquid staking protocol that has restaking baked in. So we're now one of the largest protocols in DeFi. We're, depending on the price of ETH on the day, about 5 billion in assets and continuing to grow. About 2.5 million ETH. And then since our launch, we've actually expanded into a broader range of products that includes EtherFi Stake, the original staking product that now has BTC and USD. EtherFi Liquid, which is a set of DeFi strategy vaults, sort of like a robo-advisor product for DeFi, and now EtherFi Cash, which has a borrowing and spending product. So it's a credit card with a non-custodial wallet that lets you actually use your DeFi assets in real life. And what we're working towards is to create a single unified experience that allows users to fully get off of their TradFi rails and just live their life in DeFi, to basically replace their traditional bank with a crypto native kind of neobanking experience in one unified, easy to use app. That's where we're heading towards over the next few months, and we'll be talking more about that. And of course, the cross-chain part of that is pretty important.
Yeah, so I want to kind of set the stage of today is all about kind of tokenization. You guys have been one of the most successful at kind of tokenizing within DeFi over the past year or 2 years, and then we'll get into the kind of the complexities of how that works with cross-chain, and then I want to touch on your point there about how to actually. You guys have been one of the most successful at actually taking that to market, and so what are some of the considerations that you guys have at EtherFi about actually going to market? But to start with the kind of 30,000-foot view of what you said, EtherFi started off as a liquid staking protocol. So although a lot of people put their hands up and knew what EtherFi was, how would you introduce liquid staking to someone who's not so familiar with it?
Yeah, there's so many layers to it that, well, in kind of 15 seconds, the way proof-of-stake blockchains are secured is you take the native token of the blockchain.
Drawing as well.
Yeah, there we go. You take the native token of the blockchain. In the case of Ethereum, that's ETH. You deposit it into a special contract, which then lets you run a part of the network. Gives you a special set of keys that you can then use to run a part of the network. The challenge with that is that it costs right now about, I guess, $60,000 worth of ETH to be able to run a single Ethereum node. And so what people have done is they've tokenized that receipt and made it liquid, meaning made it tradable and usable within DeFi. And so that's what liquid staking basically is. It's a set of receipt tokens for staked ETH that allow users to then leverage this asset within DeFi. And the benefit of using that asset versus I guess vanilla ETH is that it is yield bearing. So you're now getting the native interest rate of the network in addition to having the upside or downside exposure of ETH.
Awesome. So I very simply drew this as you have your native gas token ETH, you put it into a staking contract and you receive an ERC20 receipt token, which is what you guys have been so successful at doing, and a couple others within DeFi. And so this obviously all happens on the Ethereum L1, which is where people kind of associate as the proof of stake blockchain as you introduced it. How does that get more complex as you start thinking about some of the other chains that are interested in going to? And actually, maybe before how it gets complex, why is it interesting to consider some of the other chains that are out there?
Yeah, let me actually stand. So,
nice. We have a real whiteboarding session.
On Ethereum layer 1, depending on the state of the network, transactions obviously can be pretty expensive. And so if somebody is staking $1,000, let's say $1,000 worth of ETH, and they want to stake, that transaction might cost them between a few dollars today to potentially even as much as $100. So it really becomes not practical for anybody who's staking or wanting to use the token in DeFi less than, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars. Even then, you're eating up, maybe a few months of yield potentially. So this is the whole thesis of Ethereum, is the roll-up centric roadmap that has given birth to now dozens, maybe hundreds of layer 2s that lower the cost of participation on Ethereum and create different ecosystems that maybe focus on different things. So it's pretty important. Stated that way, it's pretty obvious why a staking product, whether it's ETH or BTC or USD, needs to make its way into layer 2s, right? Because if we want to serve a broad range of users, we can't do that just by staking around on layer 1. And then the challenge and question then becomes, how do we do that in a secure way? How do we do that in a way that doesn't create a structure where every network that we expand to becomes a single point of failure for the entire $5 billion of assets that we have, which I think is an interesting discussion in terms of how we did that.
Yeah, for sure. So just to, again, set the stage for maybe people who haven't thought about bridging as much as someone like we have done. I believe the first chain you guys expanded to was Arbitrum, is that right?
The first chain we expanded to was Arbitrum, but we just used the canonical bridge.
Yes, yeah. So we'll talk through the canonical bridge, because that introduces quite a lot of interesting challenges. So again, just to set the stage, the Arbitrum L2 is an optimistic rollup. There is a canonical bridge between L1 and L2, where you can move your ETH up to Arbitrum using their canonical bridge. To go back down from Arbitrum to Ethereum takes 7 days. And so to Mike's point, if you want to access the users or the liquidity that is on Arbitrum, you still want to provide them with a good user experience. You want them to have cheaper transaction costs, which is what you get up on Arbitrum. And so the experience that you want for the user is the exact same thing. You want to be able to let them stake into a contract and immediately receive their liquid staking token. And so to the user, the experience should look exactly the same as it does on Ethereum L1, which is why these two diagrams are exactly the same. But the problem for someone like EtherFi is they now have assets locked in this staking contract that need to make it down to Ethereum L1. And so do you want to talk through some of the challenges there are with that? And most time.
So with a canonical, every layer 2 has a canonical bridge that plugs into layer 1. So you can technically take pretty much any token on layer 1, bridge it to any random layer 2 using the standard bridge that the layer 2 themselves kind of deploy. Usually usually they're the ones that deploy. The problem with that is you can't then move those assets from one layer 2 to another without paying a swap fee in most cases. So if, let's say, you take your USDC or whatever and move it into Arbitrum, and then you want to move it from Arbitrum to Optimism to something else, it's going to cost you a bunch of money. So if you're doing that with like a couple $100, it might cost you $10 or $15 to move from one layer 2 to another, which again defeats the whole purpose, right? Like that's, the whole point of layer 2s is it's supposed to be cheap. With staking, that's even more of a problem, because let's say you have a bunch of ETH on Arbitrum because you either deposited it in there or at one point you bridged, you bridged it over, and you want to stake that ETH to earn a yield, or you want to farm something, whatever you want to do with it. What you want to be able to do is to just stake it on Arbitrum and then get that yield-bearing asset and then be able to move it around to L1, to L2s, or whatever you want to do with it. So none of those things are possible with the canonical bridge. It really breaks that experience. The only thing that you can do is, for all of these actions, is swap for the asset, which again, for a couple $100 might cost you 10% of your assets to do, which defeats the whole purpose. So what we had to do was create a system, a bunch of smart contracts with the help of LayerZero, that allowed users to directly mint, if they had ETH on Arbitrum, to directly stake it on Arbitrum and get the a one-to-one mapping to the staked ETH asset without paying a swap fee. So now instead of paying $10 to stake their $1,000 of ETH, they're paying a penny, and they're getting exactly one-to-one. If you stake one ETH, you get one ETH. Now, the mechanism by which we ended up doing that, it ended up being quite complicated, but it ended up creating a good experience for our customers. How detailed? How much
we'll do it quick. We have some of the diagrams to help us, but I just wanted to point out that even as someone who's been building on LayerZero for a number of years and has built a pretty complicated protocol on top of LayerZero, Stargate, I always say that the sync pools that EtherFi use for their kind of chain expansion is probably the coolest architecture that I've seen built on LayerZero. There's a very, very well-written article that like runs through the whole thing. And we'll try and do the quick TLDR. We don't want to bore people with a lot of technicals, but I think it's as we're talking about tokenization, and obviously it's a LayerZero event, talking about expanding to different chains, thinking about how kind of the complexities of the protocols behind what the like retail-facing experience is. It's really interesting to think about what something like LayerZero enables. And so, as Mike was saying, the user experience you want on the L2 is I have my ETH, I deposit it into a contract, I immediately receive my receipt token, I can then take that and go operate around DeFi. But then, as we said, EtherFi now have some Ethereum locked in a stake contract on L2 that needs to be bridged back down to mainnet. And so I will quickly run through how the sync pools work, and you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong at any of these points. But effectively, when I, as a user, a retail user, I take my $500 of ETH, I interact with this EtherFi contract. It will immediately issue me my receipt token, which as a user is great. It will also initiate a LayerZero message from the from the L2 down to L1, which effectively causes one of the wrapped ETH on mainnet to also be minted. The reason why you want to do this is to ensure that you have global accounting across the whole system. The money, the actual Ethereum, does not move at that point. There's just like a simple kind of accounting mechanism, LayerZero message that gets sent back down to mainnet. And the idea behind the sync pools, the reason that they're called sync pools, is that what it means is that EtherFi can, at the end of every day or whatever cadence they choose, kind of batch the bridging transaction down from the L1 down to mainnet. And so from a user's perspective, because your transaction is being batched with a whole bunch of other users, you maintain that same experience of a very quick and cheap experience of using the L2, and that's why you're on the L2 in the first place. And so from a user's perspective, you stake your ETH, you get your receipt token. In the background, there's a LayerZero message that gets sent back down to mainnet immediately to kind of update the accounting. And then what happens in a separate transaction during these syncs is that the value that's actually locked in these pools gets bridged back down via the canonical bridge back down to Ethereum mainnet. And so again, user experience, one click, transaction is done, but in the background, EtherFi are doing this quite complex mechanism that utilizes LayerZero to maintain accounting. How did I do?
Yeah, no, you got it. There's a couple of tricky aspects to this. So one, as we talked about earlier, is the most important thing you want to achieve is the user can do the thing they want to do and do it cheaply without losing a bunch of their money. So they can stake for a penny instead of tens of dollars or multiple percent in lost slippage. The second thing that's important, that's even more kind of in the background, is you want to make sure that we've expanded to, let's say, 100 different L2s. Some of these L2s are great and they've been around forever and they're super secure. Others are, brand new chains. They're not battle tested. What we don't want to happen is that every single layer 2 chain that's out there that we're deployed on is now basically a single point of failure for the entire $5 billion that we've got in the protocol. Because that becomes a very attractive target for, certain Northern Korean-based, hackers. So one of the benefits of this type of this design and the way we implemented it is that it allows us to also have rate limiting from everywhere to everywhere. So if one chain, for example, one layer 2 gets fully compromised, like literally the nodes are taken over, the chain can now do, in theory, do anything and commit anything. That still doesn't put the entire protocol at risk. At worst, it would end up with maybe a few hundred or maybe a few thousand ETH lost, which is much more manageable than $5 billion worth of losses. Because if somebody, for example, takes over a chain or compromises the contract and is able to infinitely mint ETH, staked ETH on that layer 2, what you want to do is prevent that from then being able to disperse across all the other layer 2s and layer 1 to rug the entire protocol. So that's one of the powerful elements of this design, is that it prevents that from happening. And I think those two things, specifically being able to mint, stake, and withdraw one-to-one, super cheap, without slippage, without fees, and to not put the protocol at risk, regardless of how many chains we're on. I think EtherFi is the only, as far as I know of, we're the only liquid staking protocol that has that design, which is pretty cool. I mean, we've made, I think, a lot of decisions that have allowed us to become pretty successful, but our cross-chain strategy, I think, is one of those. I mean, we have probably $1 billion. Charles might know. How much do we have on various layer 2s? Probably well over $1 billion now, if you count Berachain and stuff. So it's been a pretty successful major part of our strategy.
I think a lot of people, I mean, everybody today talks about interop. Everybody knows that there are different chains. Hopefully everyone that's here today is interested in the fact that there are many chains. That's why we're at a LayerZero event. But I think a lot of people will point to EtherFi being one of the most kind of successful cross-chain expansions. And it's exactly because you guys have thought through kind of this architecture and what it takes to really expand. And I realize that this diagram now is getting pretty complex. Hopefully the people who are in the room are still with us. I know if you walk in and look at this screen, you might not be as happy, but hopefully you're still with us. And you just mentioned Berachain. I wanted to kind of touch on that because we spoke about the kind of L1, L2 relationship. Everybody knows there's a canonical bridge. Sometimes they take 7 days to bridge out. But you also want to access something like Berachain, which has been a very successful launch in recent times. But Berachain don't have this kind of canonical bridge that's built on your traditional optimistic rollup or something like that. And so as a quick TLDR for those in the room, the wrapped ETH asset, which is just the ETH asset, the main canonical ETH asset on Berachain, is actually issued out of the Stargate protocol. We won't get into how that works, but effectively, if you want to have the same experience that you had up here on Berachain, you take this wrapped ETH, you stake it, you can receive wrapped ETH, but now the assets that need to get bridged back down to Ethereum mainnet by EtherFi through these sync pools actually has to get bridged through the Stargate protocol, which is not a canonical bridge, different trust assumptions, but effectively operates in the same way, where you want to take these assets from another chain, bring them back down to mainnet. And so something else that EtherFi, you guys have done very successfully is the ability to actually adapt between not only being on an L2, where like the interface with the canonical bridge is the same, but also being able to access some of these other ecosystems where, Berachain, I think today has probably $3.5 billion of TVL, depending on the price of ETH, roughly. Definitely top 5 or 6 chains, I think, today, and only launched about a month ago. And so really has taken a lot of the TVL from DeFi. And so, how generally, I guess, transitioning more into kind of the go-to-market type questions, how do you guys think about general chain expansion and what are the things that you're looking for in an ecosystem? Because to your point, you don't necessarily want to be on every single chain on day one because there are some risks associated with it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly any of the larger ones. So we fairly recently did something with Movement, which is another pretty successful, or hopefully pretty successful chain. And our plan is to continue doing these launch partnerships with any of the high-profile projects that we can work with. Yeah, I mean, in the end, I guess the demand really just comes from customers. With Berachain specifically, we noticed that there were a lot of customers that were asking for it, and we started to see a trickle of ETH exiting EtherFi so that they can go farm Berachain. And when we see that, and we're pretty obsessive about tracking that kind of stuff. Literally on a daily basis, we look at where all the ETH flows in and out are happening. So when we saw that people were exiting in order to farm Berachain, we very quickly kind of rallied together and decided to do something about that. So anytime we see our customers doing something that we want to be able to then support that as quickly as we can.
Yeah, and I said this earlier. I think the speed at which you guys at EtherFi operate and your ability to like make the decisions to spin up something quickly to be able to support Berachain, I think is what has kept you guys super successful. It's also something that we think a lot about at Stargate. We launched Stargate V2 7 months ago on 19 chains and slowly kind of expanded to 1 or 2 chains per month. But so far in 2025, we've expanded to 29 different chains because we've also kind of found a very, I suppose, good market advantage in being able to move very fast and so deploy to kind of 3 or 4 chains a week to be able to like expand the network as far and as wide as possible. And so I think as people are thinking about tokenization generally and thinking about being at a LayerZero event, thinking about different ecosystems, if anyone's interested in talking about tokenization or tokenization cross-chain, Mike and I will be over at the whiteboards over there. Is there any final words you wanted to say?
No, yeah. Hopefully this was somewhat interesting or entertaining for you guys. Yeah, I guess we'll be at the whiteboard to answer more questions. If you want to learn more about EtherFi and some of the kind of broader vision stuff that we're doing, keep an eye out on ether.fi, our website, where we actually have a pretty exciting rebrand launching in the next few weeks that will talk more about this broader, I guess, crypto native neobank vision that we're pursuing.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.